difference was.
Yeah, so right out of college, I started coaching Bantam North York Storm. And I was, supply teaching, but also training to be on the national team. So it was kind of just something fun that I thought, why not give back to the game that's given me so much. So that's really how it started. And then from there, I just fell in love with, you know, making connections with those young girls, telling them my experience, giving them my advice on, things that they need to do, and obviously helping them, transition, from Bantam to midget to junior, looking for scholarships. So from the Bantam level, I went up to midget. I coached in Oakville for quite some time with Jim Nyhus. And then those girls went off to junior. And then I ended up coaching the Toronto Furies in the CWHL. I know like the job came up and I was actually just had retired in 2017, and I was like, why not? Why can't I coach at that level? And I thought, the challenges that I was going to face where I was, similar in age. I played with or against tons of them. I, had been to bars with quite a few of them. So I think, making that transition into, okay, like, is this going to be my career? And if it is, then I need to make sure I do this professionally. And I think just the respect that I had from those players really, gave me the confidence that, maybe I'm good at this. Maybe I could do this for life. And it was pretty humbling and rewarding to have the respect from, Sarah Nurse, Renata Fast, Natalie Spooner, players that I had played with on Team Canada, I had tried out against for years, and to be able to stand behind them and have their respect and them listening to, whatever I might be throwing at them from a game side of things, was so humbling. And so at that point, I was like, this is what I want to do. And I moved on to the NCAA with Princeton, where I'm at still right now, and I just continue to grow as a human, interacting with all these young women and just seeing how mature they are, the way they handle themselves and carry themselves, and they're professional day in and day out. And obviously here at Princeton, the academics is quite high. And so just to see how they can, get one of the best educations in the world and play at the top level for their age is pretty incredible. And to have even the smallest impact on them. I think that's why we all coach. We love the relationships we make. We love the helping them in any way we can, even if you touch 1-2 kids a year. I think that's really why we do it. We obviously love the X's and O's, and we can all talk for hours about hockey, but at the end of the day, we show up for those players because we love those relationships. We love making an impact. And so I think that's truly what I love most. And it's pretty incredible that there's so many opportunities now for coaching in women's hockey that it can be a career. So that's really exciting. I think, one of the biggest things that I've learned transitioning from being a national player to coaching is every player ticks for certain reasons. And like you said, it's easy to corral a team in 2 weeks because you're going for this gold medal. So, there's that quick instant gratification, but how do you corral a team, throughout a year, throughout a season, and how do you pull everyone in and make them committed and love each other and strive for the same goal? And I think as coaches, our job is to find what makes each player tick, and everyone is different. But if you can figure out what makes them show up to the rink every day and what they love and what they care about, and just kind of reaching out to them, you're going to create a culture and environment where everyone feels valued and excited to be there every day and excited to be on the ice, even though they were, doing academics for 8 hours that day before they got to practice. And so I think just genuinely caring about each one of your players just goes miles and miles in the women's game.
And I think, Court, it's really yet another example or yet another lesson that a lot of young coaches have to learn. You seem to have learned it early and maybe started with that approach that, the X and O's are important. There's an element of that that's really important to any team, but before that, and more importantly than that, it's the relationship thing, heard it my whole career, but took me really a long time to realize that that is more important than the X and O's, to create that connection like within the team, between the team socially, especially in the female game, but between coaches and players, and getting to know and understand your players is really more important than telling them what to do. And we like to talk about on here to try to avoid telling them what to do, but help them figure out what to do by asking them questions. But it's just another really good example of how important that relationship building aspect is, and sort of the Socratic mentoring aspect, which you would have learned about in your teaching courses at UNH, that asking is sometimes is often the best avenue to helping someone learn something, rather than just tell them, hey, do this.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, one of the greatest things about the under 18 worlds was we want, like, you ask them to have this great environment, but what does that look like? Like, what are the steps to getting that? And I think we were, as a staff, we had played together, so we already had that chemistry. And you sit in a group and we share our stories with the girls, and Tara and I are kind of going back and forth how we were just fighting for a position against each other. And the players, they see that, and they see the connection that we share and that we shared, and how cool it is to now be their coaches, but having had been in their shoes, right? And so they're seeing this connection. And I think right there, they're, that culture, that environment that you want to create is apparent because it's within the staff. So if the staff can do it, it's going to trickle down into the group.
Absolutely. And what about sort of your approach at Princeton with Cara? Maybe talk a little bit about that, like how you guys approach your jobs and your tasks there and your team building there.
Yeah, so it's funny because we actually just did some closing meetings, and I think coming off a year where our culture wasn't as great as we wanted it to be, and we obviously didn't have as many wins as we wanted. And I think when you win, everything seems great, but once you start losing, that's when your culture really shows. And the players talk a lot about holding people accountable. Well, what does that look like these days? Because there's a fine balance, right? There's a fine line. And at the end of the day, our jobs are on the line if it's too harsh, and if someone didn't like it. We all know how the world kind of is these days, so you got to kind of toe that line. But we like to, right when we get to campus in the fall, have these team building activities. Like one year we went rock climbing, we went to a Flyers game, we sat in a box, we did a little outreach, community service part where the girls, like younger girls, came on the ice and our girls ran the session, and then we went to the Flyers game. So I think creating those connections outside the rink, and making the incoming class feel like they are part of this family, because some of these girls have been together for 3 years. So they're, the incoming class kind of comes in and they're a little bit on the outside for, the first few weeks. It's just natural because everyone knows each other. So how do you get them into the culture right away? And I think doing little activities, and the players did ask for even more of that, which is kind of funny because you don't know how much they really want to do it, or, are you wasting their time? They have academics, they have practice. So I think really finding that balance of like too much or too little, it's kind of right there in the middle. But Kara's really great at team building and building a culture. That's something she takes pride in. She's done, I think, tons of podcasts and interviews on how she creates a good culture. But again, I think it comes from the top. She meets with every single player once a month. And I don't think there's another coach out there that takes the time to meet their players once a month. And just, it's not even about hockey. It's, how is school? How is your family? It's, they're just sitting there chatting, and that goes a long way again, with that culture, that environment, making them feel valued and feeling like these coaches actually care about me, not just as a hockey player. So I think that's one really big thing we do here at Princeton.
Cool. And maybe talk a little bit about, I guess, both at Princeton and with your U18 experience on, we talk a lot about bench management here and how different coaches handle that. Do you have a philosophy yourself, you and Kara, and your staff going into U18s? How did you approach it with Tara and Steph?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, lucky enough, here in Canada, we have some very, very skilled athletes. And so I think, when you pick this team, you're picking players that you're gonna feel confident putting on the ice. So we were lucky in that aspect that heading into the tournament, we knew we were going to be able to play everyone, and I think that also is huge for that environment. You have them for 3 weeks or 2 weeks, and making them feel valued, like I continue to say. But what we did end up doing was, we found our power play players, and then we tried to make sure that, if you weren't on the power play, you were on the PK. And of course, that doesn't always work out, right? Like, you're not just going to give everyone a role. You're at the World Championships. You need to play to win. But in that sense, obviously some people were kind of double agents playing power play PK. But for the most part, everyone had a role. And, if they weren't on the power play or PK, then, there's a role in, all right, at the end of our power play, this is the line that's going to go out and shut them down, because that's a big shift too. Right after the other teams had a power play, or right after we've had a power play, there's that energy burst from either side. And so we had a line that was their role. And I think just being open, honest, and clear with what their roles were. And, whether it be you're going to log a lot of time or maybe you're not, but like, here's your role. I think that they really appreciate that, just that communication. Everyone just wants to be heard and feel like they have a role. So that's kind of what we did at the World Championship side of things. And then at Princeton, I think it's a little bit more difficult. We have a little bit more players. We have 2 people that are scratched each game sitting in the stand. So how do you make them feel valued? How do you keep them, wanting it all year long? It is a long year. And so I think, we struggle with that because it's such a long season. And I think that we need to get our fourth line players a little bit more ice somehow. Like, you have to find ways. And I think, at Princeton, being the Ivy League, the drop off, it's pretty significant from your top forward to, your bottom forward, in the fact that we have financial aid and they have to, have the grades to get in. So we don't always get the top picks of the pool. And so I think it's, finding them ice time, and what does that look like? And again, just communication, having those meetings, talking with them, making sure they feel valued, and also making sure their teammates still value them, because your ice time shouldn't depict whether you get respect or not, right? Like, these players, they spend so much time together. Like, they need to love each other outside the rink too.
Absolutely.
Tim, Rick Reddick had his hand up. I'm wondering if Rick had a question.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Yeah.
No, Rick just had an itchy finger on the wrong button.
Okay.
But thanks, Courtney, for all you're offering here.
Okay. My question is related to the long term, having extra players, having scratches. We talked to Scott Rivet, who coached Mount Royal College at the CIS Championship this year. And during COVID, he had 27 players. And
Wow.
one of his proudest moments was in the previous season, 27 players, nobody quit. He was able to keep them positive, and I've always found that remarkable, because players just want to play. If you don't play, you really don't feel valued. Yesterday, I was talking to Carla McLeod about Team Czechia, and she talked about her fourth line minutes. And she said it was a challenge because of TB timeouts. Those minutes went down to 8 minutes a game. And she was sensitive to it. And I think being sensitive to it and being able to communicate on it was critical. But your fourth line, like, I sort of operate on the philosophy of no TV time outs, 12 could be a max. 10, 12. I don't know. But you don't begin and saying you're trying to get this goal. You're going to read the game as it goes, coaching with your gut in terms of who's going and who's going to play situations. But the challenge of making a team come together. Back in our day in 2002, we had 10 penalty kill people, 10 power play people, and I don't like two people playing the same role, and we didn't at that time. But when we ran into penalties against the Americans, like 8 in the first period of the Salt Lake City final, yeah, Wickenheiser did get to go penalties to the point of exhaustion. They had to get some extra ice time, but I asked Danielle Goyette if she recalled getting any ice time. She didn't on the PK. So the art of coaching is, having a philosophy, consistently living by it, and realizing you can handle things internally. So it's I'm always really curious about this, because in minor hockey, and I don't know that it occurs at the girls level, but at the boys level, whether it's U15 or U13, they just shorten their bench to win. They're not cognizant of the emotional impact and lack of development that occurs, because power play people are always getting extra ice time, and they're going to be moving up the ladder used to extra ice time. And when they get to a national team, that doesn't happen. They become entitled. So to me, that's the precarious nature of coaching and dealing with things. And I'm wondering if anybody else on board can speak to this idea of managing a bench to create a team, and just the idea of what you went through with the U18 team, Courtney. You obviously had designated power play people and PK people, but how did you create that? And how did it come together? Was it before the tryout? You knew who it was? You had a good idea, or did you switch things up in the competition?
Yeah, I think, heading into the World Championships, I think we had an idea, but we weren't, we were willing to adjust, because now it's been, 5 months since the last time we saw these players. At this age, so much development happens in 5 months, and we were ready to make changes. And so we went in with an idea, and it absolutely changed heading into, so we had our exhibition game. After that, it definitely changed. And in our first game, we actually lost Jocelyn Amos, our captain, who was a dual agent, going to play on the power play and the PK, so log some big minutes. So right then and there, you had to make adjustments. That's, a player that was going to log quite a bit of ice time. And we actually didn't get her back until the semis, and not even fully back. So then we made adjustments, and honestly, some people really impressed us with how much they bought into being a PKer. And so I think that's huge, by allowing them to see how important PKing is too. Everyone wants to be on the power play. They think they're going to score goals, but I think sometimes the power play is almost harder than the PK is, because it's hard to score goals. I think on the power play in women's hockey, I definitely think it's an area that we could focus on. So, finding value in that PK, and our players, as Kim had mentioned, kind of calling it the power kill, not the penalty kill. Finding a way to make them value that was huge. So I think there were a little bit of adjusting, between the exhibition game and the first 2 games, but heading into our third game and then through, we were pretty consistent with the roles that we found those players in. And yeah, definitely bench management, it helped. And then we ran into 14 penalties, which is 28 minutes in one game. So, now you're putting power play players out there because your PKers are just getting crushed. And so there's a lot of adjusting and juggling that goes into it.
Yep. Courtney, I wanted to mention a couple of things. Number one, in Ontario, working with Brian Hart, who I'm sure you know, and their Team Red and Team Blue, having 2 teams at the U18 level, I believe my role at Hockey Canada back in the day was to guarantee they developed and they rolled the lines. And Ontario, for the most part, did that to a T. Everybody got to play power play. Everybody got to play the penalties. The outcome at the U18 level wasn't the case. I'm expecting now that Ontario has been a little more challenged. They may be scratching their head about the outcome, but the bottom line was for me was the national team and the Olympics. It's all about developing for the Olympics, whether it's U18, whether it's the World Championship team today. You use the term double agents at your level, and my philosophy is everybody plays all roles first half. They earn them, and the second half, then you create the roles and assign them. But there's flexibility within earning your ice time, maintaining it, and changing it. And when I watch our senior national team play, and over the years, I see Jenner and Poulin on both PK and power play against teams that we could roll the lines on. I think that takes away from the psyche of the team and the belief in the team rather than the dependence of the great players. So the World Championships that Canada won here in, I believe it was Canada. Poulin was injured, and they beat the Americans 6-1 without her in the lineup. And that was one of the few times that I said, yeah, this is what happens. The best team wins. So the idea of managing that bench, manipulating it, shortening it, I think the art of getting the most out of everybody is critical. In female hockey in Canada, we can roll the lines right up to the most of the teams. But when you're creating that power play only against the lesser teams, you're not creating a developmental mindset with the long-term outcome in mind, which to me is the gold medal. Tim, I got a question about 2006.
Well, Wally, Kim had her hand up, so let her interject, and we'll go back to that.
Go ahead, Kim.
Thanks, guys. I just had two comments on bench management, more so in like the messaging and communication of it. One would be, I often referred to the power play people as the slow it down players and the penalty kill as the speed it up players. I think those who've seen me play would argue I am definitely a speeded up player. I was not a power play player, but I was the player who go out there and create chaos and, got a lot of penalty kill minutes. So I think it's a different terminology, which I actually quite liked, because if I don't identify as a slow it down type of player. So I like being sort of that moniker of a speeded up player. Like that really spoke to me. I don't remember where I stole it from. I definitely didn't come up with that. But I thought, that's a way, maybe in minor hockey, like a different way to put it. If you do have, I know when I coached junior, I definitely had players who, were doing certain roles and not doing other roles. And that would sometimes be the way that I would message it to them. And depending on the kid, it seemed to resonate with a lot of them. And understanding that we're going to be a bit more patient on the power play. So you have to be a slow it down player. One thing I did in minor hockey, and I don't know if it would work at the national team level, but it'd be an interesting thought experiment. I think a lot in minor hockey, like the parents want their kid to be on the power play, right? We assume the players want to be on the power play. I think a lot of girls hockey players don't want to be on the power play because they're scared to be on the power play. So when I coached U15 AA, my first year as a head coach, I had them vote. Like they had to, put up their hand if they could only choose one special team, which one they would want to be on. So we did this vote with, obviously the goalies don't get to vote. They have to be on both, but 15 skaters, only 4 of them said they'd prefer to be on the power play. 11 of them said they'd prefer to be on the penalty kill. So obviously, we played a 4-man power play. No, but I mean, it was interesting because, and some of the kids who I thought were my most skilled players didn't want to be on if they had their choice. And it did come up a couple times in conversation with parents. They'd be like, oh, like, how come these players on the power play? I'm like, well, when we did this vote and the kids were honest, some of them actually said they didn't want to do it. I don't know why. I didn't necessarily pry with all of them, but I think our perceptions of what people value and what position they actually want to be in, everyone thinks they want to be on the power play, but they might see, and in girls hockey, again, the penalty kill is often drives the offense a little bit more than the power play, certainly up to I would argue, the U15 level. So that was just some thoughts that I had on maybe different ways to message those things with younger players. But I definitely use the speed it up, slow it down when I coached junior, which had been the same age group that Courtney was coaching at Worlds. And I don't know, they seem to identify with it a little differently that maybe hadn't been explained to them that way before.
Kim, I have a question for Tim. Tim, 2006, in my mind, was the best, most dominant national team Olympic performance ever. And I'm curious about the roles you created and how you managed the bench with that particular team, because from top to bottom, everybody seemed to produce and contribute. Can you talk to that experience? And it's a long time ago, but I think still has application to how we coach today and create synergy today. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, like Mel did a terrific job that year of, like you talk about, Wally, basically auditioning all the players for all the roles for a good chunk of our year. She would change roles, change assignments, so every player was put in kind of every role. So like power play roles, penalty killing roles, and even you're the extra players today where you're maybe not going to get a lot of power play penalty killing time. And it helped us in several ways. Number one, as Courtney mentioned, players can surprise you. We all have maybe little prejudices at times as coaches, and players can surprise you given an opportunity to perform. But so every game through that year until pretty late, maybe even into December, we left for Torino in third week of January. Going into every game, it would be, okay, Court, your line and Kim's line, you guys are going to be our power play groups today up front. And on defense, I'd have two D pairs that were going to be on the power play. The third D pair knew that their role was going to be penalty killing that day, and we would switch those every game. And, even up front, the lines would take turns being, sort of the third energy line, not playing as much. We could see how players reacted, both psychologically to being in a reduced role and physically. Could they give us their best in a reduced role? So Mel did a terrific job that year, sort of auditioning all the players for all the roles and learning a lot about the players and how they would handle those different roles going forward. And then going into Torino, we pretty much had two power play units, would be my memory, two power play units. But the beauty is, and I don't think we did have an injury, but the beauty is if everybody knows and understands and feels competent as a power play person, if there's an injury, really easy to slot somebody into a role to get some assistance. Same thing, penalty killing, like Court situation at Worlds, 14 penalties in a game, and Wally's situation in Salt Lake City, 8 penalties in the first period. You can't leave your best players sitting on the bench for a whole period. They need to be involved. And so it's really important, I think, as a coach, that all players gain an understanding of all the rules and be ready to fill those rules when you as a coach feel is the right time, or there's just a desperate need for the team to have you fill a role that you don't normally play. So, Mel did a great job that way, that year, Wally in particular. And we did play 4 lines a lot, but we did have an energy line. Megan Augusta was one of our energy people at that point in time. on the development front. Like, she was an extremely gifted offensive player, but she was one of our water bugs, we called them. That was our energy line, the fourth line. Go out there and create chaos through just, use of your speed and your energy. So yeah, roles are really, really important, of course.
Courtney, we use the term transmit belief. That's a coach's job. And what Tim talked about is defining that line as an energy line and them embracing that role is critical. I experienced observing a midget AAA boys team this year. From the get-go, they identified the two skill lines. The third unit was sort of the lines that could sort of half skill, half energy, and the fourth line was energy from the get-go. Consequently, the power play people were selected, and a lot of things were allowed during the season where the best players could take minute-and-a-half shifts. And it all worked out to the detriment of the team by not leaving a sense of earning your role. And young players are going to evolve at that U18 level. They're going to evolve into roles if given the opportunity. And that's the thing that always intrigued me about national U18, 22 development team and senior teams. Everybody that makes those teams has been on the power play growing up. Everybody who's a forward usually played center. And they have to become a winger. And they have to, that psychologically, it's a big adjustment to accept. So I think that's, it's really a part of the art of coaching right now. And in minor hockey, the biggest reason I'm on is try to wake up minor hockey coaches to managing a bench versus shortening it and building and transmitting belief doing that. So welcome, Sammy Joe. I'm sure you're going to enjoy the hour and 7 minutes that we've been able to talk so far. And congratulations on a great job broadcasting. Courtney's been sharing her experience at the U18 Worlds that they won with an all-female staff, and it's just been excellent. So, Sam,
anything off the top, Sammy, that you'd like to ask Courtney about her experiences so far?
Well, first off, hi, Court.
Hi.
So I have to say that I hired Courtney with the Toronto Furies, and that was probably one of the best choices I ever made in management. I was pretty lucky to get her. The league did not want me to hire her because she was so young. And my basic premise was, in men's hockey, you don't hold the age against the guy. So why do it in women's hockey, right? And so she did what I thought was the smartest thing and surrounded herself with great mentors around her that could help her through sort of navigating that first year professional. And I was pretty fortunate. I feel like we would have still been the dream team had the Furies still existed, unfortunately, but we all had to part ways. And so the Furies coaches still all get together once a month, minus Courtney, and sometimes we FaceTime her and sometimes we just take pictures. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. That was a great group, and I'm sure you guys heard a lot of great things from Courtney. I can't wait to see the recording, but yeah, I can't say enough about what a great coach she was. That's it. That's my diatribe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Court, maybe just chat a little bit about, because it's about your transition from playing forward